Last month we covered the start of the violent and unforgiving campaign that took place in the provinces of Zhejiang and Jiangxi as the Japanese invaders hunted down the American pilots that had taken part in the Doolittle raid. In their ensuing struggle to curb down the Chinese air power in the region, the natives of Zhejiang and Jiangxi suffered the abuse and savagery of the Japanese troops, who caused such devastation to the land that around 90% of the market towns and its homes were destroyed. In many cities, the streets were left void, and one could only see ruins and burning houses on the horizon. Yet this was just the beginning, with the invaders now preparing to withdraw from the area with the employment of biological warfare, thus leaving only death and misery in their wake. In the month of May, the Japanese Empire had entered into the provinces of Zhejiang and Jiangxi to destroy the Chinese air bases in the region, successfully achieving their objectives by late June with the capture and destruction of the airfields at Lishui, Chuzhou and Yushan. With this, the invaders hoped to secure their home islands from any air raids that they might suffer from Chinese soil, and they also wanted to punish those involved in the Doolittle raid, be it the American pilots that had crash-landed in these provinces, or the Chinese population that had aided them afterwards. In fact, little did the pilots know that the same gifts and trinkets they had left behind in Chinese villages as a reward for their help would later on be evidence of their stay there, something that would directly lead to the torture and murder of those who they had called friends. During this period, in which the Japanese temporarily occupied the region along the Zhejiang-Jiangxi Railway, the Chinese defenders wouldn't sit idly by either. General Sawada and his 13th Army effortlessly repelled the Chinese counterattack against his western front, but he would be plagued by guerrilla attacks all across his occupied territory. The 11th Army of General Anami, however, would face the brunt of a renewed counter-offensive by his longtime rival, General Shi Yue, and his 9th War Area. With his 79th Army defeated, he now decided to transfer the 4th and 58th Armies from Changsha to Liuyang, ordering them to recapture the lost position at Linchuan. During the latter part of June, the Chinese forces seized the line of heights on the left bank of the Fuhe River, gradually moving in on Linchuan, while the Japanese waited for an opportunity to counter the enemy thrust. By June 25th, the 4th Army had settled on an exposed position south of Linchuan and Huanzhen, so Anami decided that the time was ripe to open his attack. He first sent the Takehara detachment towards Chongren to cut off the enemy escape route, while the 3rd Division and the Imai detachment exerted heavy pressure on the Chinese positions and started to push them towards Yihuang. By July 30th, the 4th Army had been routed and its main strength had been annihilated in a perfectly coordinated offensive action. In response, the 58th Army started to withdraw from the Chongren area, but it would be rapidly intercepted by the Japanese forces near the town of Xiaotou, where the Chinese army would stoutly resist until its rear units began to retreat towards Jiangsu. By July 6th, the Chinese had been completely defeated, and its retreating soldiers had fled into the distant mountains. In the meantime, General Sawada was also preparing to undertake an operation to destroy the Chinese naval base at Wenzhou, where Allied submarines were being refueled and supplies were being smuggled into the countryside. In that regard, he ordered the Kozunoe Mixed Brigade to advance towards this objective on July 2nd. 5 days later, the brigade departed Lishui and got to capture Wenzhou on July 11th with the support of IJN vessels, defeating many Chinese guerrilla units on the way. With the hazardous O River cleared, Sawada then began preparing for his next operation, this time against the last remaining Chinese base in Zhejiang, located at the town of Songyang. After getting transferred to Longyou on July 12th, the Harada Mixed Brigade was ordered to advance on Suichang 2 weeks later. By August 1st, the town had fallen, so Sawada now directed the recently arrived Nara detachment at Lishui and the Harada Mixed Brigade at Suichang to execute a pincer movement against Songyang. 2 days later, the last Chinese base had been reduced and many materials, including railway equipment, had been confiscated. By the middle of August, General Sawada and Anami were content with the amount of destruction and looting that their troops had incurred, so they decided it was time for their final withdrawal from the region. Sawada planned for his units to initially concentrate in the vicinity of Chuzhou, then to commence their retreat towards Jinhua. There, the 22nd Division would be left to garrison the area, as the Japanese could still obtain valuable materials such as fluorite, copper and tin from the region. On August 15th, the 1st Japanese unit began its withdrawal towards Chuzhou, successfully concentrating in the area by August 25th. The following day, the final retreat towards Jinhua began, spearheaded by the 22nd and 32nd Divisions, and by August 31st, the 13th Army had completely assembled around Jinhua, where Sawada instructed the 22nd to commence the fortification of the area, and ordered the 70th Division to cover its rear at Shaoxing. The 11th Army, meanwhile, gradually began to withdraw its forces towards Nanchang, completing this action by August 27th. Yet coinciding with the withdrawal operation of the Japanese units, the secret bacteriological warfare group known as Unit 731 was sent to the region to execute land bacterial sabotage, so as to prevent the Chinese from quickly reoccupying these territories to immediately rebuild their destroyed airbases. This unit, in direct violation of the Geneva Protocol that prohibits the use of chemical and biological weapons in war, had been formed in 1936 by a secret order of Emperor Hirohito, tasked with applying biology and medicine in weapon research and manufacturing. Commanded by the infamous Colonel Ishii Shiro under the name Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, Unit 731 had been conducting inhumane activities in the region around Harbin since its establishment. Inside their square quarter, which consisted of 4 3-story buildings and acted as a special jail to hold victims, Japanese surgeons and scientists took part in horrendous human experiments such as living dissections, bacterial infections, and frostbite experiments, resulting in the torture and killing of thousands of innocent civilians. The captives in the square quarter were also stripped of their name, personal information, and identity, only getting recognized through a 3-digit number, something that earned them the name Marutas, which means logs in Japanese. Inside these laboratories of death, not only were men, women, children, and even infants dissected, they were also infected with deadly diseases such as anthrax, cholera, and the bubonic plague through a variety of infection methods, including oral medication and injection. Large-scale human experiments in the field were also conducted, resulting in the detonation of germ bombs that could kill several people in just a matter of hours. Frostbite experiments took particular relevance for the Japanese scientists, as they wanted to investigate what would be the effect of extremely cold temperatures on the human body so as to be prepared to fight in such conditions in case war with a nation like the Soviet Union erupted. From these experiments, in which human subjects barely clothed were exposed to temperatures below zero, the Japanese hoped to produce dried bacteria and to study the prevention and treatment methods of frostbite. They also conducted poison gas experiments, defining different types of poison gas in their laboratories while testing and producing gas masks and protective suits there. This resulted in the invention of a poison gas analyzer, an anti-poison gas medicine, and disinfectants for poison, in addition to the research on poisonous weapons that was conducted in their labs. But it would be their research on bacteriological warfare that would become of extreme relevance for the Chinese people of Zhejiang and Jiangxi. From their main base at Pingfang, Unit 731 launched a great variety of outdoor field experiments on bacterial bombs, bacterial vaccines, and bacteriological war strategy, while at the same time importing a large number of rats, mice, and rabbits as experimental objects used to spread bacteria along with insects such as fleas, lice, flies, and mosquitoes. These living creatures were infected with more than 50 kinds of bacteria, including plague, typhoid fever, anthrax, glanders, and tuberculosis. Evoking the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Unit 731 had the power to spread a wide variety of diseases on their enemies, provoking famine, pestilence, and death on them, and bringing a disaster to the ecosystem. Since the start of the war, Ishii and his followers would invent at least 1,770 bacteria bomb models, including the frequently produced model UJ-150, which was built in a ceramic shell that could protect the bacteria from temperature. These ceramic bombs usually held anthrax and bubonic plague carrier fleas, and when they exploded, the biological agents were dispersed into the air with great lethality and destructive power. In 1939, their research finally started to be put into action, causing hundreds of Chinese communities to suffer from widespread plague, cholera, and typhoid fever, something that resulted in a high death rate for the unsuspecting civilians. An important bacteriological attack carried out by Unit 731 and its satellite Unit 1644 was the Kaiming-Jie germ weapon attack of October of 1940, which targeted the area of Ningbo in the province of Zhejiang. In this attack, wheat, corn, scraps of cotton cloth and sand carrying plague-infested fleas were airdropped over the area, resulting in a huge outbreak of bubonic plague that claimed the lives of hundreds of innocent Chinese inhabitants. Such was the devastation brought by the bacteriological warfare that the area had to be quarantined and later burned to the ground to eradicate the disease. Now, to accompany the withdrawal operation of the 11th and 13th Armies, Ishii and his Unit 731 prepared again to conduct an important bacteriological attack over Zhejiang, this time with the airdropping of the easy-to-carry ceramic bombs. Ishii and his followers engaged in heated arguments on which bacteria was best to use, and in the end, they decided to employ plague, anthrax, cholera, typhoid, and paratyphoid, immediately ordering almost 300 pounds of anthrax and paratyphoid for the operation. These would be then delivered inside some Peptone bottles labeled as water supply to Nanking, where the bacteria would be transferred to metal flasks. In order to support the airdropping operation, Japanese troops would contaminate wells, rivers, and fields using these flasks, hoping to sicken the local Chinese forces and guerrilla units to prevent them from quickly reoccupying the region. Furthermore, the Japanese also prepared 3,000 rolls contaminated with typhoid and paratyphoid and then handed them over to Chinese prisoners of war, subsequently releasing them to go home and spread the diseases. Another horrific tactic employed by the Japanese was to deposit biscuits infected with typhoid near fences and behind trees to make it look like the retreating soldiers had left them behind, knowing full well that the hungry inhabitants would devour them without a doubt. By August 1st, the success of the bacteriological operation was already discernible, so Major General Ishii was rewarded with a promotion to Division Head of Army Surgeons in the 1st Division, subordinated to the North China Area Army. In his stead, Major General Katano Masaji was appointed as the new head of Unit 731, and it would be under his tenure that the apex of large-scale production and development of bacteriological warfare would unfold. But the success of Unit 731 would quickly get out of hand for the Japanese Empire. By December of 1942, massive outbreaks of cholera were reported by the Tokyo radio, and not long after that, the Chinese government would have to quarantine many towns in the province of Zhejiang due to the epidemic caused by the Japanese. Many retreating Japanese soldiers would also get sick with the diseases spread by Unit 731, with losses amounting to more than 1,700 men as their own biological weapons turned on them. Nevertheless, this was a terrible price that the Chinese had to pay for the Doolittle raid. Not only did entire villages get looted and burned to the ground by invaders, not only were their women raped, their men tortured, and their children slaughtered, but their land, their own ecosystem, was also harmed with the use of bacteriological weapons, leaving entire regions uninhabitable for many years. Those poor souls that were lucky to survive 2 months of violent and savage Japanese occupation would have to face the deadly diseases the invaders left behind. There would not be many survivors, but those who did would reach out to American and Chinese reporters and investigators so that the knowledge of these Japanese war crimes would not be forgotten. Next week we have a special episode in the works for you, so stay tuned for more from the Pacific War series. If you don't want to miss any episodes, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.